Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked here on the channel. This is the series where I talk about every single book on my shelves because it is my own personal curse. Today we are going to be talking about Frances Hardinge's Unraveller. Some quick disclaimers before we start. I did buy this copy of the book for myself, but if I'm remembering correctly, I think I had a digital review copy. Regardless of where books come from, nobody's paying me to talk about books except my patrons, and all opinions are my own. I will keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible while still talking about the book as a whole. If you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, pause the video, come back when you've read it, and we'll talk then. And I will link the storygraph for the book down below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings. I hope the cover is indicating this, but fairly hefty one for if you've got arachnophobia, maybe this isn't the book for you. Perhaps. This is, I think, the most recent Frances Hardinge book I've read. I have a lot of other reviews up for her books on the channel. I think there's probably 5 or 6 at this point. I'll try and make a playlist if I remember, and I'll link it up in the corner. This is her most recent that I've read. It came out in 2022, and it is a young adult, but I think you can read it as adult, fantasy, not horror, but slightly scary in moments, generally speaking, kind of book. Was that helpful for any booksellers wanting to know where to shelve it? Absolutely not. In a world where anyone can create a life-destroying curse, only one person has the power to unravel them. Kellen does not fully understand his talent, but helps those transformed maliciously, including Nettle. Recovered from entrapment in bird form, she is now his constant companion and closest ally. But Kellen has also been cursed, and unless he and Nettle can remove this curse, Kellen is in danger of unravelling everything and everyone around him. Lovely. Lovely little foiled cover. I adore these Frances Hardinge hardbacks. They bring me such joy. I'm going to start by talking about the world, because I think Frances Hardinge's world building is one of my absolute favourite things about her books. It is often the make or break for a book for me, is just how interesting this world is. In this case, we have a kind of marshy area that is filled with people who can develop curse eggs, which is sort of a metaphorical concept, this idea that somebody will kind of become bitter or angry, or for whatever reason, they will develop a curse egg and eventually, is the thought of the people in this world, they will curse someone. And these curses are kind of typical fairy tale curses. We encounter a woman turning to stone, for example. And then we have Kellen, who is somebody who unravels those curses, hence the title of the book. Nettle's curse, she was transformed into a heron. That's why there's quite often a heron on the cover. I think of the paperback edition, but I'm not sure which version. I'll stick that up in editing if I remember. And then within the world, also there are all sorts of creatures, some of which are kind of legendary. We do a lot of travelling within this book, so there's a lot of different local folklore things going on within the world. I really like this. It felt very much like a world informed by word of mouth, which was very interesting to me, and a real sense of kind of community knowledge and keeping each other safe from the outside, from creatures, from other people. There's a real sense of almost paranoia in the world, which helps add to that overall level of tension, and as Kellen and Nettle are travelling around, how they build trust with people. In terms of Frances Hardinge's worlds, sometimes they are incredibly surreal, and sometimes they are slightly more anchored in reality. I think this sits somewhere in the middle. Obviously, there's a lot of magic going on, generally, that is a part of everyday life. For the most part, things tend to have rules and expectations set to them, where in other books, it sort of leans more into the nonsense side of things, intentionally, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I actually really liked where this book sat on that spectrum. Kellen and Nettle as characters, I really love Nettle. I think Kellen is a good protagonist, and I think he's an interesting person, he's got an interesting story to him, all of the above, but Nettle is the one who really touched my heart, and I think that's intentional in the book. She's just fascinating. I love the idea of a cursed character and her just finding her attachments in the world again. It's a really delightful story. I think she's a wonderful heroine. One of the, again, world-building elements that I really love about Nettle and Kellen is that they don't wear woven clothing, because Kellen has this thing where he will unravel it. If it's woven, it unravels for him. So they're always wearing leather or felt, nothing woven, which is just a lovely little detail that adds to the world. To touch on Kellen a bit more, I think it's really interesting how Frances Hardinge explores his flaws, and I think the idea of how having an expectation of how things are can be harmful. I think it's a really interesting one for particularly young adults to read, because it's kind of at the point where you're forming your own preconceptions about the world, and I think a book encouraging people to challenge those ideas is always going to be helpful. I found this book incredibly readable. I think the actual writing is lovely. Again, it has that Frances Hardinge quirkiness to it. There's a lot of fun character naming conventions. There's a lot of that slightly surreal world building that leans into the writing a bit more. I think if you've liked her previous books, you will certainly like this. I would say if you haven't liked Frances Hardinge's writing to date, but this concept has you interested, I would maybe say it's probably not going to change your mind, even though it is a fantastic concept. If the writing is what bothers you, this isn't going to be it. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend reading this if you have a problem with spiders in books. The little brothers, who are sort of the creatures that bring the curse eggs, is probably the easiest way to talk about it, are not spiders, technically speaking, but they are spider-like, and the book kind of treats them as spiders, and there's other mentions of spiders as well. I would say wouldn't read this if you had a big phobia. I am not a fan of spiders, but I managed to cope reading this. That's my 2 cents for you. I think it's also interesting where it sits alongside her other writing, because a lot of her stuff feels very middle grade, possibly older middle grade. I would say this sits firmly in young adult, if not older young adult. There's a lot of themes that I wouldn't necessarily suggest that children dig into at this stage if they're kind of 12. I would say maybe, how old are children? Maybe like 14 and up could probably cope with this, maybe 13. I don't hang out with kids very much. If you're a person who works with children and you recommend this book, where would you sit it in their shelves? Reading it as an adult, I just found it really enjoyable. I don't think it's kind of too YA, which we often talk about on this channel. I think it sits almost timelessly, almost agelessly. There's a fairy tale quality to it, and I think anyone could enjoy this book. Other things you might want to read, I think for Frances Hardinge, the closest thing for me is either The Lie Tree, which I think is another really interesting story, or possibly, what's it called and why can I not remember? Deep Light. Deep Light is the other one I think I would say similar, especially because Deep Light has those like body horror elements to it that I think draws into the scarier elements of this. So if you liked Deep Light, you'll probably like this. I think Robert Jackson Bennett does equally interesting world building. I think Samantha Shannon does equally detailed world building. I don't read a lot of young adult and middle grade these days, other than Frances Hardinge and a few other notable authors, so I don't know if there's anything super similar on the market, but I think that is one of the big selling points, is she kind of writes like nobody else does. To be honest, I've yet to find anything on my shelves that is a book that I can easily go, if you like Frances Hardinge, this is the next thing to read. I don't think I have that in my heart. I don't think I have that on my shelves. I don't think it exists for me yet. Let's never say never, there's plenty of books I've not read. But yes, she sits in kind of a little pocket of uniqueness all on her own. Overall, would I recommend that you read Unraveller? I think yes, unless spiders are a big problem. I think it's a really fab story. It just manages to hit home and still be a really interesting mystery, adventure, quest kind of storyline, which is something I'm always here for. If you were looking for like a seasonal time to read it in, I would say it's an autumnal book. I think shifting of the seasons, maybe. It feels very much like that kind of story. Have you read Unraveller? Do you have plans to? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, let me know your favourite Frances Hardinge if you've read others. I would love to hear that, and whether you're excited for whatever comes next. I don't know what it is. I don't think there is anything due, but we shall see. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also come hang out on Discord, where we have chill chats about books. I'd like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams, and more. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much to you for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. I have a whole host of reviews up for other books written by her,